You've got no on your experience on the union, and I don't really recall seeing you at any of the protests this year, so you also don't have any experience of the union. Why should people trust you to lead it?
Well, firstly, those things aren't true. I have been on several committees. I was on the committee which led into the ultimate decision to give more money to this bull to raise...
Societies and committees are different to leading a union.
I don't think that's true. I think a huge part of the union is dealing with these societies, is dealing with these committees, and that's how we can stay in touch with the general population of Heathrow, how I can stay in touch with the electorate, and how I can make your next year better. It's also not true that I have no experience of unions, because whilst it's true that I have never held a position in Heathrow's union, I am in fact treasurer of the University of London Union Debating Society.
Again, that's a society, that isn't a union. They're two very different things.
Right, but it does mean that I've been active on the union, within a union. Obviously, a union needs to have members, it needs to have its publicity officer, it needs to have all of these things, which are all incredibly important. But ultimately, the HSU as a body has a certain set of goals, and one of the ways it can achieve those goals is through societies. I think we all agree that societies such as, for instance, the Catholic Society, as an example, have a hugely positive impact on Heathrow.
Yeah, but it's all sort of very well and good saying that you've experienced on societies with very specific goals. However, as a leader of a union, a fundamentally political body, you have no experience, unlike your...
Okay, so any position on the union presumably has reasonably specific goals. So, that's true of any position. If your complaint is that I have never been president of the HSU before, guilty as charged.
You've never worked with inside the union.
But that I just ultimately dispute, because I would say the impact that I've had with the union, firstly, in the committees which I talked about before, it seems like at the point where you're being consulted as a head of a number of societies about what the direction of the college, about whether or not you're going to raise the amount of money that's going to go to a ball, those seem like kind of important things and ultimately part of what the union does. So ultimately I think I have had a pretty influential part of the job within the college. And one of the things of it is in the union.
I sat on that committee as well, occasionally, and I wouldn't say I've had an influential part because of it. So I dispute that. Anyway, so let's move on to your manifesto. You talk more about getting Fordham and Richmond students involved and trying to communicate with the student body more. I think you mentioned videos. The problem is about communicating with the student body and getting, just generally getting the Fordham students involved. That's stuff we see every single year. And it's usually quite difficult to deliver on when the president is a full-time, is employed full-time. How are you going to do it part-time?
So firstly, I think things like I'm under no illusions, okay? The fact that this role is part-time does not mean that I will only be your president 2 days of the week. I think no one really expects the HSE president to do that. Ultimately, you're going to have questions and queries that you'll probably want answered outside of the 2 days. Now, obviously, the general manager will be able to take off some of the workload from me, but ultimately there may still be questions which only I can answer, or which only a vice president can answer. So in response to your question, Fergus, firstly, I want, videos seem to be reasonably innovative. I've never seen, we've had a very, very limited amount of things like that done, and I think we're slightly pessimistic about their effects.
In a time when EGM attendance, where we had 2 EGMs this year that didn't make Chorusy, when the HSU occasionally tries and starts to do a blog at the start of the year, and no one ever reads it, and given that, I think Alex Yost promised to do a bi-weekly meeting or a fortnightly meeting, and that didn't happen because it's a fault, because he's got a lot on his plate. How are you going to be able to deliver on things that other officers have struggled to do, given that the role is only part-time and you will be doing your studies alongside it?
That's absolutely true. Firstly, the fact that there's going to be a general manager means that the whole ballpark has been completely changed. There is still going to be someone who is going to be working full-time. So I think, once again, you're being a little pessimistic. But also, to add to this, I currently do a lot of stuff with societies. Now, I've arranged for most of these societies to now be taken over by various other individuals who I hold to be incredibly competent. And so I'm going to have, I already do an awful lot. I already run a Logic Society debating society, 2 debating societies, and I'm on the Philosophy Society committee. I do a lot of things. I'm quite good at doing a lot of things. I will continue to do a lot of things which are hopefully useful, fruitful for the college's future.
Alright, well, the other sort of aspect of that question was about stuff we've seen before. Now, I was going through your manifesto, and I think about 11 of the 15 sort of specific points you talk about are basically just copy and pasted from the job description, all promises we've seen before. Why is your manifesto so uninspired?
So,
it's generally stuff that happens every year, or the job description?
So firstly, I think there's probably a reason it happens every year, and that's because most of it's quite a good idea. Secondly, I think you're slightly unfair as to it merely being the job description. I have a few unique things which I want to push, as I'm sure you've read. But ultimately, a lot of my manifesto is about me, and I'm reasonably unapologetic to that. Because I think that in the changes that the college is currently undergoing, we need a strong leader. We need someone who has lots of experience with things that actually matter to people. And it's true, I wasn't on the union. I'm happy to put my hands up and admit that. But the reason I wasn't on the union was because I felt I could have a really positive effect in other ways, and I think I've probably done that. That's why I think I'm really happy to propose better integration with the University of London as a whole. That's why I feel confident to say that I want to drive us towards better representation and better university experience in terms of relations with Fordham and other close universities.
Okay, so the thing about this sort of saying better representation is it's a little meaningless. So we're saying all of this with, Fordham is again completely, it's just not, there's no detail to that. And another one of your promises, you said you wanted to have events with free drinks. But then give no details upon that at all. How frequent would these events be? How much free booze would that be?
I'm really glad you asked that question. It's definitely something I didn't talk about so much in my manifesto. So to fill you guys in, basically I have a rough idea of sort of running maybe a formal style system that we've seen at other colleges across the country, whereby, and we actually held something reasonably similar at the start of the year that was incredibly successful, whereby we invite everyone in the college together. Maybe we have a meal with around 30 people and we provide free wine. We can also invite academics, but ultimately that just needs further consultation with the student body as a whole. But that's the kind of thing that I'm after.
Why focus time and resources on that when we already have a bar? Shouldn't we spend now, right towards the end of this EPROP as we know it here, on improving stuff we have rather than undermining it by offering free events?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. So at the status quo, the fact of the matter is Heathrop's probably not going to last very long, at least in the form that it currently is. That's very sad, but that doesn't mean that we should, that almost makes it nonsensical to invest more in things which aren't going to be around for very long, and that's why I broadly want to invest in sort of people, and that's a bit of a meaningless phrase, but I've instantiated it in my manifesto in a few ways that I'll talk about later probably. So, why do I want to focus on sort of free alcohol? Firstly, free alcohol tends to be cheaper for the people who get it than paid alcohol. The bar sells paid alcohol. The bar cannot give free alcohol. I think it's a unique, it's just a different kind of experience. It's just a different kind of event. The event whereby everyone gets together and they have a couple of glasses of wine, rather than the kind of event where we still have the bar. But of course, ultimately, I'm just underselling myself here. It's not an either or. We can still do bar events, but ultimately a lot of bar events have just sort of failed this year, and I think they'd be more successful in the free alcohol format.
On failure, where do you think the union's gone wrong this year?
I'm not actually overly critical of the union. I think they've done a number of things correct in incredibly difficult conditions, and I'm broadly sympathetic.
Such as?
So, for instance, the student representation, they've done a very good job in terms of holding EGMs on both the initial decision to oppose St Mary's and then the further allowance of students to change their minds.
We had 2 EGMs that didn't make chorus yet. I think that's unprecedented.
Yeah, so that would be one of the negative effects that
It was a general meeting, AGM, OGM, no EGM, that's how I was going to chorus.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. One of the general things, though, that I think the union needs to do better, it needs to better communicate with students. It needs to, so far the union has relied pretty heavily on the odd Facebook post and emails. Now, I know that I check my emails semi-regularly, but I know for a lot of people, firstly, a lot of people just don't do that, and I'm not going to judge you massively negatively for that, that's okay. And secondly, sometimes when you've got a lot of things on your mind and you're scrolling through the email to check for that library fine, you probably just don't pay very much attention to union message number 703, and that's absolutely fine. And I'm very sympathetic with that. That's why I want to expand in new directions, expand with video formats, expand with audio formats, and just sort of make it slightly easier. Now, it's true that these are serious difficulties. Alban halls, for instance, are going to have significantly fewer Heathropians in there, in the halls, and previously the union has managed to sort of communicate through Alban halls.
I still don't think that you really told us, though, how. You said sort of videos, that's a one-way thing.
Yeah, so like that videos would be one example. Also, generally posters I think are of a limited effectiveness and they're really bad for the environment, printing out thousands. But ultimately, a few posters here and there. I also want to be able to communicate through RAs. I think it's perfectly legitimate for an RA, a resident assistant in the halls, to tell people that there's an event going on. This year, I know that didn't happen a huge amount. I was very rarely, like the times that I was told to go and tell people about things, it was generally a sort of a Facebook message from one of the organisers about, really just as the event was starting, and that kind of thing isn't necessarily so effective, especially when we have a lot of untapped resources in terms of like notice boards in the kitchens,
okay,
which put up for that kind of reason.
We're actually going to have to edit there, unfortunately. That is 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, everyone.